Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmiritamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Gurum Sri Yutapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Namo Namo Niruddhaya Hishikeshendriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nivratatmane Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchisade Namaha Namah Hiranyaviryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion of the third chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the third chapter is almost done. We are almost towards the end. But there are some key verses towards the end which we would like to go upon or go through today. And we would also be going through chapter 4. And both of these are setting the stage for further discussion of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The third chapter specifically set the stage by giving us the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, by giving us the Paribhasa Sutra, telling us what we need to constantly remind ourselves of while we read the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the Srimad Bhagavatam itself is going to give us details of the many prominent incarnations of the Lord, but ultimately we would want to remember these incarnations in the context that they are expansions from the original personality of Godhead, who is Sri Krishna himself. The main motivation of Srila Vyasadeva was to touch upon the subject matter of transcendence, but with a central focus on the origin of all transcendence, which is Krishna himself. And his despondency is the subject matter for the fourth chapter, or rather we discuss how Srila Vyasadeva began the Srimad Bhagavatam. But in the third chapter, it is very clearly established that we constantly have to endeavor to keep in mind, to remember very clearly, whilst reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, whilst reading about every other incarnation, that they are representing but a part of what Krishna represents. And we spoke about it over the last 2 weeks, perhaps more. Now, text 41, which is verse 40. We will start with verse 40, we will conclude chapter 3, and then we'll go on to chapter 4. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Sammitam Uttama Shlokar Charitam Chakara Bhagavanu Rishihi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Danyam Swastyayan Mahat. Danyam Swastya Ayanam Mahat. Swastya Ayanam Mahat. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Danyam Swasti Ayanam, all blissful. Right. So, Swasti Ayanam is the path enunciated by Srimad Bhagavatam, produces all auspiciousness, all blissfulness. It is the path to attain complete happiness. And it is also perfect. Perfect is a word which is not used lightly in the Shastric context. But if it is used in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is very clearly, the authoritative sources have established that this is perfect, completely free from all effects of matter. That is perfection. This is completely free from all effects of matter. This purport by Srila Prabhupada, text 41, first canto, third chapter, text 41. There is a very important statement which Srila Prabhupada makes in this purport. And I would just like to read a couple of statements so that we can understand the essence of what Srila Prabhupada wanted to convey. These are his realizations. So here's the statement which is important. Lord Chaitanya's private secretary, Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami, advised all intending visitors who came to see the Lord at Puri to make a study of the Bhagavatam from the person Bhagavatam. So if anyone wanted to meet Lord Chaitanya, if anyone wanted to come in touch with Lord Chaitanya, the secretary of Lord Chaitanya used to advise such devotees through other mediums that first they must read Srimad Bhagavatam. Once they read Srimad Bhagavatam and they learn the Srimad Bhagavatam from a bona fide source, and then they should come and meet Krishna, who is Lord Chaitanya himself. So it's very poignant. It's a very, very pertinent statement made by Srila Prabhupada. It's a very important realization for us as well, that for those of us who have the good fortune of coming in touch with the movement of Lord Chaitanya, those of us who have been initiated in the movement of Lord Chaitanya or planning to get initiated in the movement of Lord Chaitanya, we are essentially aspiring to come in touch with the full potency of Lord Chaitanya, which is the holy names. And we want to serve Lord Chaitanya, and by serving, we would make automatic advancement. You see, there are many different ways to approach the topic of advancement. For us, it's very clearly a part of our preaching mission. The more we serve in the preaching mission, the more we contribute to the preaching mission, the more we would be getting closer to Lord Chaitanya. The instruction given here by Swarup Damodar Goswami. Swarup Damodar Goswami was not an ordinary personality. He was Lalita Sakhi herself. It was the very close personal associate of Srimati Radharani. So when Srimati Radharani descended, or when Krishna descended in the mood of Srimati Radharani, Swarup Damodar Goswami and Ramananda Raya were Lalita and Vishaka Sakhis, the close associates of Srimati Radharani. They descended as well because these were the two intimate associates in Vraja of Srimati Radharani. They associated with Mahaprabhu in this particular Leela when Krishna descended as Mahaprabhu to serve him. So when statements and instructions are being given by such personalities, and when it is written by someone such as Prabhupada, where there's innumerable statements that can be made in a purport. But when he makes a statement, Srila Prabhupada, he makes a statement with deep realization. He says that it's very important. Lord Chaitanya desired that people first learn Srimad Bhagavatam before they even come in touch with him. Okay? So a means of coming in touch with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is to learn Srimad Bhagavatam but from the person Bhagavat. Now, who is the person Bhagavat? The person Bhagavat is one who has relished Srimad Bhagavatam and who is living life based on the tenets of Srimad Bhagavatam. Realized knowledge of scripture essentially is where knowledge from scripture can be applied in day-to-day existence. Okay? realized knowledge from scripture is, I'm sorry, there was an interruption, technical interruption. Realized knowledge from scripture is essentially the ability to digest scripture and to transform the tenets of scripture into practice. So the person Bhagavat is one who has realized the message of the Bhagavat. And he has realized the message of the Bhagavat, or she has realized the message of the Bhagavat and is actually living, is a living preceptor. So coming in touch with such a person and then hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one is able to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. There is some very, very clear directions being given here in regard to how to learn Bhagavatam and what are the qualities. And I'm going to touch upon all of these today. Okay? The first statement here, which is very important, is to approach Mahaprabhu, one has to know the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay? We should bear that in mind. Now, the second statement which Srila Prabhupada makes in this purport, which is quite important, is one can derive from the study of the Bhagavatam all benefits that are possible to be derived from the personal presence of the Lord. This is such a profound statement that all benefits one can derive by personal association, personal contact of the Lord can be derived from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is like saying that you could be in proximity to Krishna in Braja. You could be in proximity to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And whatever benefits one can derive from such proximity, all that is contained in Srimad Bhagavatam. This is again a very, very profound, deep statement made by Srila Prabhupada, that the Srimad Bhagavatam practically is personal association of Krishna. Okay? We should remember this as well. It carries with it all the transcendental blessings of Lord Sri Krishna that we can expect from his personal contact. Whatever we can expect from his personal contact, one can relish. So it is no surprise that our acharyas made very deep study of the Srimad Bhagavatam a part of their daily focus. Because by making it a part of their daily focus, by coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam, the verses, the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis, they practically experienced personal contact with Krishna. The same relish, the same ecstasies that one develops when coming in touch with Krishna in his presence, when one has complete faith, the same thing is being experienced by our acharyas very sincerely. So these are three different instructions which Srila Prabhupada is giving, which is very profound. First is, we should approach Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through an understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam, by hearing it and learning from the person who has practiced Srimad Bhagavatam, or the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, who has realized it. Second message, one who comes in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam will experience the same benefit as coming in touch with the personal form of Lord Krishna. So this is very profound. So it almost tells us very clearly that the temple program which Srila Prabhupada instituted was based on these realizations. He carried forward a tradition. Because if you walk on the streets of Sri Mayapur Dham, you will find Bhagavatam being discussed and Bhagavad Gita being discussed in more or less the same format. Gaurarti, Gaurarti, and then you have Mangalarti. All the prayers are more or less of the same format in different Gaudiya Matas, right? Of course, in our ISKCON, we follow Srila Prabhupada's principle, and Srila Prabhupada instituted the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam early in the morning, because one who bathes in the wonderful essence of Srimad Bhagavatam very early in the morning derives the association of Krishna, depending on their adhikar. And by doing so, they are able to fulfill the purpose of life that particular day. Because the purity which is contained in this extraordinary scripture carries forward its influence throughout the day if it is done early in the morning. So Srila Prabhupada instituted Bhagavatam classes in the morning after chanting. Chanting is a prerequisite to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. One cannot understand scripture and develop realizations without having an attachment to the holy names. So we are going to be getting into some qualifications shortly in the next verse, because these two verses, the last few verses of the third chapter, are touched upon by Srila Prabhupada, and there are many statements that he makes in terms of being able to read, absorb, teach. So we're going to touch upon all that. Text 41. Tadidam grahayam asasutam atmavatam varam sarva vedeti hasanam saram saram samudratam. Sri Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, who is the most respected among the self-realized, after extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories from the universe. So, Saram is essence, right? So, this is being delivered through Srila Shukadev Goswami by Srila Vyasadeva. And Sukadev Goswami himself is described here as the most respected among the self-realized. Is being described here as the most respected amongst the self-realized. So the Vedic literature of Srimad Bhagavatam is the cream, saram. And what is a cream? Cream, in essence, is that one has to churn buttermilk, one has to churn milk, or rather, milk has to condense for it to form a very thick layer of cream, which is the essence. Right. The most important part of milk, in one sense, is the cream. It's the butter and the cream. So, in that sense, this churning process is the process of being able to read Srimad Bhagavatam after due chanting of the holy names, and then read Srimad Bhagavatam and agitate our intellect and agitate our mind with the verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the conclusions of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and by doing so, we derive the cream. So there's churning. This is deeply realized knowledge, because those entities, those personalities who have spoken the Srimad Bhagavatam have realized it. And after realizing it, they're speaking it, which means that they have already churned through all the topics in different ways, and they've reached very firm conclusions. If we read the commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam, the authoritative commentaries of Srimad Bhagavatam were written by Srila Jiva Goswami, and Srila Jiva Goswami practically took notes from the other Goswamis and then created the Sandarbhas, which is a deep study of Srimad Bhagavatam. He broke down the Srimad Bhagavatam in different ways. And when he did so, we will notice that there has been a tremendous amount of, agitation of the intellect, or use of the intellect, rather. And that agitation and use of the intellect is so purifying that the cream and the essence comes forth after such agitation, right? So in a similar fashion, Srila Vyasadeva delivered this cream after he had compiled the Vedas, after he had done everything for other levels of participants. And he compiled the cream of all knowledge, because this was done at his maturity. He had already realized all the knowledge of the Vedas, and then after which he established that, okay, this is the cream. In this, I will describe the different incarnations. And when I describe these incarnations, I will disclose their pastimes, with prominence and so on and so forth, right? So all of this is actually the cream of knowledge of Srila Vyasadeva, who practically compiled and had complete grasp of all Vedic teachings. He then found a very appropriate vessel to carry this message. That vessel was qualified because of his purity, his exalted nature. That was Sukadeva Goswami. And what is the statement of purity which is being made here? Srila Prabhupada makes a statement here in the purport as well, right? He makes he basically talks about the fact that, number one should not derive the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam from those who have sex desire. That's a primary qualification which Srila Prabhupada describes here. He says, one who has sex desire, if you hear the Srimad Bhagavatam from them, it becomes tainted, because they have desires. Those desires will also be passed on. So he gives the example of milk touched by the lips of a serpent. So hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from a qualified speaker is being emphasized here, and that is why Sukadeva Goswami is being glorified to such an extent, because of his purity. So the most apt vessel to carry the cream was Sukadeva Goswami, who was completely free of all forms of mundane desire. Right. So Srila Prabhupada gives in the purport, he gives certain qualities. Okay, I'm going to read the next verse and then I'm going to talk about that as well. He says, Satu Satu Samshravayam Asa Maharajam Parikshitam Prayo Pravishtam Gangayam Paritam Paramarishibihi Paritam, being surrounded, Gangayam, on the banks of the Ganges. Praya Upavistam, who sat until death without food or drink. Okay. Sukadev Goswami, who collected the essence and the nectar from Srila Vyasadeva, spoke to Maharaj Parikshit, who did not even touch food or drink for 7 days while hearing Srimad Bhagavatam on the banks of the river Ganges, Ganga. So now a man who has come to learn that he is going to die in 7 days, he will not be tempted if he is if a proper situation, if he has led a life of devotion, he would not be tempted by unwanted mundane desires such as the sex desire. So the qualified subject was Parikshit, who sat without any form of sense gratification. He fasted while hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. There was no eating, there was no drinking, and they were sitting on the banks of river Ganga, very auspicious surrounding, purity. And the vessel who had gathered the cream from Srila Vyasadeva was Sukadev Goswami, who was completely free of all mundane desires. So this nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam was being passed on by a personality. Kirtanam was being performed by a personality who had no sex desire. It was received, Shravanam, by Parikshit Maharaj, who, because of the fact that he was so highly situated, his body, Parikshit Maharaj's body, was actually given by Krishna. It was not mundane, you see. So we will learn further as we go through the further cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam that when Ashwatthama, the son of Dronacharya, in anguish, released the Brahmastra destroyed the physical body of Parikshit. It was Krishna, by his mystic opulence, who presented Parikshit Maharaj with a body. So that body which came after destruction, but by Krishna's mercy, will not trouble one in the pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Whenever something is being given by Krishna, such opulences, be it the material body, it could be power, it could be wealth, it could be anything. It would not torment the person who receives it. And that such a person would be able to fully live a life of transcendence and be able to concentrate on the goal of life, which is the Paramapurushartha, which is Krishna Prema. Because Krishna is making such arrangements. So after the Kurukshetra, Parikshit Maharaj received the body, which was given by Krishna. So now you have a personality who is receiving, Shravanam, who has senses completely under control, whose mind is sober because death is impending in 1 week, who is completely fasted so the senses are not agitated, they are being deprived of their whatever strength in certain ways so that he could concentrate. So now you have Shravanam being done by a person who is also free of all material desires. Kirtanam is being done by a person who is completely free of all material desires, who is transcendently situated, which is Sukadev Goswami. So Srila Prabhupada says that this Srimad Bhagavatam, when it is being spoken by anybody, if that person themselves are free from mundane desires, then the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam reaches the audience in a much quicker way. So he actually says very clearly that one who has sex desires, it should not be received from one who has sex desires. So what does it mean? You should take it in several distinctions. Number one, it means that the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear about Bhagavat Saptaha done by many personalities who are not in the Bhagavad Dharma. They are following this Bhagavat Saptaha for the purpose of uh, earning money. So, earning money for what purpose? Earning money for the purpose of sense gratification. So, hearing the pure message of Srimad Bhagavatam from such a personality who is engaging in this activity for the purpose of wanting to make money for the purpose of sense gratification is not going to motivate us towards Bhagavad Dharma. So, this is very important. And what should we understand from this? See, ultimately, the goal of Shravanam is to first hear from someone who is qualified to engage in kirtan. Speaking Krishna's katha is also kirtan, just as much as chanting the holy names in bhajan is kirtan. Doing japa is kirtan because you're glorifying Krishna. Speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other katha which is motivating the audience towards Bhagavad Dharma is also kirtan. But then the quality of the speaker is very important, just as much as the quality of the person doing Harinam is very important. When Srila Prabhupada did Harinam in Tompkins Park in 1966, when he came here to New York City, that started the whole movement of Lord Chaitanya to be spread around the world because the potency of his chanting. And if you hear the tapes of Prabhupada chanting, it is so powerful because the ether is so strong. There is such a perfect, rather very powerful quality in his voice where he is able to transmit and allow the transcendental message to reach across. The transcendental names, they have such a transformative effect when you hear. So the speaker of, for example, the performer of Harinam, if they have potency, they have the ability to transform. So if you go and do Harinam on the streets, there are many souls who can practically connect to the movement of Lord Chaitanya, provided the chanter of Harinam is pure. Because the injection of the holy names has to occur through a pure medium. It is transcendental. The holy names are transcendental. Golokir Premadan, Harinam Sankirtan. The transcendental holy names, they're descending from Goloka and they're dancing on the lips of one who is pure. So when such a person does Harinam, he is doing so completely with relish and connection, and is allowing this transmission from the spiritual world to pass through, and that penetrates our hearts and we are able to participate. Right. So Harinam, doing Harinam is very, very important. But even more important than doing Harinam is for those who do Harinam to pay close attention to their japa. If we do not have a proper attention during our japa, every service that we offer to Krishna is practically covered by material energy in different ways. Okay, the potency reduces. So is the case with one who speaks on Srimad Bhagavatam. If one has an immense desire for engaging in the material world and engaging with their body, with their senses in so many different ways, then that desire and that lust passes on to the medium of sound into the hearts of those who hear. So that's where the statement comes, that, milk touched by the lips of one, milk touched by the lips of a serpent is again, it's tainted. Milk in itself is pure. Milk in itself is very nourishing, but it's been touched by the lips of a serpent. So there is a word of caution being given here that yes, transcendental subject matter is very important, but at the same time, who speaks it? Whom do we hear it from is also important. It's very important. Okay? So Prabhupada doesn't say that one should be renounced to be able to speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because one can be in the Grahasthashram and be completely free of sex desire. One can be in the Sannyasashram and be filled with sex desire. So the distinction here is not so much of the ashram. The ashram is not important, but the idea is that if one is having notions of wanting to come in touch with material energy in such profound ways and contaminating ways, then such a person speaking even a pure message is not going to be able to shift the hearts of those who hear it. In fact, they could be influenced otherwise. So there's a word of caution. Okay? Those of us who have intentions of becoming pure, those of us who are sincere and have intentions of becoming pure, and have the ability and the humility to step aside so that the transmission occurs, even though we don't have the capacity to be pure vehicles like Sukadeva Goswami. That is also perfectly acceptable. The intentions should be very sincere. Okay? That's also perfectly acceptable because the process is to become purified. So there is such an important qualification which is being given by Srila Prabhupada. And it is a fact. I used to reflect on the fact that Indra Prabhu, who passed away in 2010, he sat in Vrindavan. And yes, he has such a melodious voice. He was extraordinarily talented. But just understand that despite all of that, what really attracted us to Indra? How is it that he transformed so many youngsters and inspired them to take up Harinam? How is it that he spoke so wonderfully and he was so profound in terms of his attachment to chanting the pure name? He inspired so many because of his purity. He didn't have to travel. He sat in Vraja. He started this 24-hour Kirtan Mandali. And that became a source of inspiration for so many yatras and so many youngsters who became inspired by his Kirtan. Okay? What is so attractive about Indra? Someone else could be using his Kirtan, someone else could be doing his tune. But what is so profound and what is so attractive about Indra Prabhu? It's his purity. One can practically perceive the lack of mundane desire. That is the reason why there's such a profound effect when you hear Indra Prabhu's Kirtan. And it is so profound and so pure because it influences you and it does not really transform you. Right? It does not transform you in the negative sense. It doesn't really hit you in the negative sense. It inspires you. So it's not so much that one has to have a powerful tune or so on and so forth. It's just purity. So similarly, the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam has to be qualified by the lack of sex desire, which is what Srila Prabhupada is trying to establish, that one has to receive it in the parampara, one has to receive it from a vehicle which is pure, one has to hear it with purity. All these qualifications are coming up in the end. Okay? So if someone is pretending to be religious and then they give the Bhagavad Saptaha, they're talking about Srimad Bhagavatam. But what effect is it going to have on the audience? They don't take up Bhagavad Dharma. They think that they have done something, they've taken a sankalpa, they have completed a sankalpa, they walk away. Text 44. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, text 43. Krishne swadamo pagate. Krishne swadamo pagate. Dharma jnanadi bihisah. Kalau nastadrisham yesha. Puranarko dunoditaha. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has risen, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So, when Krishna departed, which was towards the end of Kali, along with him, religiosity, knowledge, etc. also departed, because when the Lord descends, he descends with his Dham. Goloka descends along with Krishna, wherever he is. And when he performs his pastimes, it is Goloka. That is the reason why Vrindavan in UP, India, is transcendental ground, because the Dham descended when Krishna performed his pastimes. Similarly, Mayapur is transcendental ground because the Dham descended when Lord Gauranga danced on the streets of Mayapur, chanting the holy names. The Dham descends along with the Lord. Along with the Dham, which is the transcendental abode, you also have the personal associates of the Lord taking birth and also coming down with him to be able to serve him. Along with that, you have obviously auspiciousness, which is religiosity. Along with that, you have complete removal of ignorance, which is in reality knowledge, which is removal of ignorance. So all of this has descended along with Krishna. And when Krishna departed, everything went with him. But the beauty was that he left behind the Srimad Bhagavatam for us. Okay? He left behind Srimad Bhagavatam for us. And the Srimad Bhagavatam, in reality, is the main source of inspiration after the departure of Krishna, because it's non-different from Krishna. So we should remember that as well. Text 44. Tatra kirtayato vipra viprasher bhuri tejasah aham chadyagamam tatra nivistastad anugrahat soham. Okay. Soham vaha shravyashyami yatagitam yatamati yat aditam yatamati shravayashyami. Okay. Saha aham vaha shravayashyami yata aditam yatamati. O learned Brahmanas, when Sukadev Goswami recited Bhagavatam in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention. And thus by his mercy, I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear this very same thing as I learnt it from him, as I have realized it. So in this, it's very important, where Sutta Goswami was chosen. Sutta Goswami was so pure that his ability to remember, the ability for memory, is directly related also to sex indulgence. Brahmacharis, people who are celibates, have a greater ability to remember scripture. They have a greater ability to read scripture, to go into scripture, because they are abstaining from sex life. So Sutta Goswami, he heard the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, which was voluminous. If you give or take, it's 18,000 verses. He heard everything and he was able to repeat everything. You see? It's very profound. So people with such great memories existed where they could just absorb and repeat. And he's saying that I will try to make you hear the very same thing. He didn't want to distort it. I'm going to make you hear the very same thing as I learned from Sukadev Goswami and as I have realized it. I have also realized it. I heard first and then I realized. He heard from Sukadev Goswami, who spoke realized knowledge. And then Sutta Goswami realized the knowledge and he's speaking it. So he's not only saying that I'm just repeating what he said. He's saying, I have realized it. So that's the reason why it becomes twice as much potent when people realize it and then they speak. Because when you realize, you speak with conviction. When you realize, practically, through the purity one has, to be able to see, for example, Karanodakashayi Vishnu lying on the Karana ocean, with universes getting into his body, universes leaving his body with each breath. When this is actually being seen, this is realized knowledge. Then there's complete conviction in the presence of, in the voice of the person, because this is realized knowledge. That is what is being mentioned here by Sutta Goswami. I just didn't hear from Sukadev Goswami. I heard, I digested, I realized, and I'm speaking now. Srila Prabhupada makes some very qualifying statements in this purport. Okay? So, he says, I'm just going to read a few statements. The word nivishta means that Sutta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. That is a real process of receiving Bhagavatam through his ears. Real process. One should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then he can at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. This is a very big thing. It's very, very big. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. Our attention is dependent on the purity of the mind. If the mind is filled with rajas, one cannot hear. The mind would be racing like a horse, where it's going at high speed because of the extraordinary level of passion, rajas. Then one does not have the ability to hear carefully. Okay, so there is a need here for purity in mind. Srila Prabhupada says very clearly, no one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. Now, next statement. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. Because when we keep acting impurely using our senses, they leave impressions on the mind. And the mind is completely absorbed in the impressions left on the chitta, on the consciousness. The senses are contaminated by action. The senses being contaminated by action will drag the mind here, there, all over the place. So someone who is not pure in action has no ability to hear from the speaker, because the mind is susceptible to the influence of the senses. The senses being in touch with matter can influence the mind adversely and can make the mind agitated. An agitated mind does not have the ability to grab and absorb information. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, the four basic activities. Now we understand why the regulative principles have been put into place. The regulative principles put in place by Srila Prabhupada are so important, because if one does not follow those regulative principles, then one is acting without purity. It is a normal tendency. It's finished. Eating is so important. I emphasize practically wherever I go to people to avoid eating if it's not offered. If you eat food which is not prasad, then it is contaminating. It would lead to contaminated desires. One then develops desires which are not very conducive for higher pursuits. And it all starts with the eating process. So Srila Rupa Goswami defined our process, and he gave us sadhana, where he said very clearly, Sevon mukehi jihva adav seva unmukhe. So if you ever want to begin service, begin with the tongue first. Start eating Krishna Prasadam. Because if you start eating Krishna Prasadam, and it is such a simple, profound, straightforward process, you would automatically be able to chant Sevon mukehi jihva adav. So the process of eating Krishna Prasadam and then calling upon the holy names. It will be very simple if one sticks to Krishna Prasadam. Okay? So this rapt attention business is required for you to be able to hear and absorb Srimad Bhagavatam. And hearing is very important, because hearing from qualified speakers, hearing from those who are pure in mind, hearing from those who are detached from material consciousness, it will transform our desires. It will have a very big impact. And the lessons and the significance of Srimad Bhagavatam will penetrate our consciousness in a much deeper sense. Okay? So Srila Prabhupada is very clear that the regulative principles of freedom is to become free from the impulse of the senses by following regulative principles. That would allow us to control our mind. These are not impositions which are unnatural. These are qualifying processes that sets us up so that we can get into more sublime activity in devotional service. Imagine not being able to hear classes. Imagine not being able to absorb the essence of what is being spoken in the class by the sadhu. Imagine, not being able to go through the scripture, finding it very difficult even to hear and understand and assimilate. All of this has to do with activities that we perform. So when we eat, sleep, mate, and defend or fear in contaminated ways, we automatically are empowering the mind. We are empowering the mind, we are empowering the senses to be in control. In reality, we need to be in control at the intellectual level. How do we remain in control at the intellectual level? the intellect itself has to be motivated by sublime literature such as Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. The intellect cannot be motivated if, because the mind and the senses themselves are contaminated. So the receiving medium is very contaminated. Light, for example, if there is a glass and there are too many distortions, then the light which is going to come out of such a glass is going to be very distorted. It's going to be impure. So in a similar fashion, when we constantly are putting ourselves in touch with contaminated sources, our senses are coming in touch with contamination, our mind is coming in touch with contamination, then one does not have the ability to have rapt attention. That rapt attention while hearing is very important. And rapt attention while reading is very important. And the reason why we are not able to read, we are not able to hear, is because eating, sleeping, mating, and fearing is done improperly. It's contaminated. But somehow or the other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person, somehow or the other, at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. So now Prabhupada is saying, at least hear from someone constantly. So by developing the process and the discipline of coming in touch with the kirtan of Bhagavatam, then one has the ability to purify themselves and make advancement in this lifetime. Okay? So that ends the third chapter with many profound messages given by Srila Prabhupada. Okay, I'm just going to quickly see, it's 9:17, and okay, let me see, I can possibly do a few more verses of chapter 4, and then I'll come to the questions. So now it is the appearance of Sri Narad Muni. This is chapter 4. Now we are setting the stage for getting into further chapters of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. Vyasa vacha iti bruvanam samstuya muninam dirghashatrinam vriddha kulapatihi sutam bhakvachah saunako bravit. On hearing Sutta Goswami speak this, Saunaka Muni, who was the elderly learned leader of all the rishis engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. Okay. Shaunaka uvacha Sutta Sutta Mahabhaga Vadano Vadatam Vara Katam Bhagavatim Punyam Yad Aha Bhagavan Shukaha Bhagavan Shukaha. Sukadev Goswami. Shaunaka said, O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadev Goswami. Okay. Then Srila Prabhupada is giving in his purport what is realization. He's saying, personal realization does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous Acharya. He must have full confidence in the previous Acharya, and at the same time, he must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. One moment, there's some. Okay. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. No obscure meaning should be screwed out of it, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. So it should be presented in an interesting manner, because the audience themselves, their attention should be held. But it does not mean that the person who is reading should reject the speaker's original realizations and simply remove and bring forth a meaning for the sake of saying that this is profound, this is new. It should be something which is very much aligned with previous definitions, very much aligned with previous conclusions, but being presented in reflection and accounting for Desha Kala Patra, time, place, and circumstances. That is realization. Okay? So he's saying that this is exactly how Shaunaka Rishi could estimate the value of Sutta Goswami, where he was very clear in praising Sutta Goswami by saying that you are most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadeva Goswami. Text 3. Kasmin yuge pravatteyam sthaneva kena hetunam kutas sanchodita krishnaha kritavan samhitam munihi. In what period and at what place was this first begun? Why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? So the questions are coming up. In what period? What place was the first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa? So Vyasadev, his other name was Krishna Dvaipayana, right? He was also named Krishna because he was dark complexioned. Krishna Dvaipayana. Dvaipayana was an island. So he was Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage. Right? So the Srimad Bhagavatam, the question was, where did he get this inspiration from? Who inspired Vyasadeva? This is a question which is being asked by Shaunaka Rishi. Text 4. Tasya putro mahayogi samadrin nirvikalpakaha ekantamatir unnidro gudo muda ivyate. His, Srila Vyasadev's son, was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist, whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. It's an interesting statement about the qualification of Sukadeva Goswami. So Shaunaka Rishi is actually very curious. He's saying Sukadeva Goswami, all in a sudden, has been the recipient and the speaker of this extraordinary literature. This extraordinary literature which speaks about the personal pastimes, the confidential pastimes and glorifications of the personality of Godhead. But then my memory is that he is a Brahmavadi, someone who doesn't believe in the personal form of the Lord. Monism is someone who is following Brahmavada, where he believes that Brahman is the destination. He is aware of the personal form of the Lord, but his experiences are such that he believes in Brahmavada, wanting to attain Brahman, wanting to penetrate the material sky and to be situated in Brahman, in transcendence. He wants to travel. He wants to cross over material universes, but he wants to be situated in Brahman. So he's curious, how is it that such a person whose entire existence, whose motivation is all about Brahmavada, it is all about being able to, reach the Brahman, which is the effulgence of the Lord, how did he get motivated? How did he speak? Tell me about it. So it's a very curious and well-known statement because it's something which would have held anybody's attention. How did he get inspired to speak about the personal pastimes of the Lord? Okay, text 5. I'm going to end with this. Drishtva nuyantam rishim atmajam api anagnam devyo hriya paridadurnu sutasya chitram Tadvikshya prachyati munau jagadushtamasti stri pumbida natu sutasya vivikta drishtehe. While Sri Vyasadev, okay, this is a qualification of Srila Sukadev Goswami. This is going to tie in with what we spoke earlier, so it's apt for us to be able to talk about it now. Translation: while Srila Vyasadev was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth, although Srila Vyasadev himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female. But the sage made such distinctions. Now, this is a very interesting statement on Sukadev Goswami, which ties in with the earlier statement that he was not motivated by mundane desire. When Srila Vyasadev passed, right? When Sukadev Goswami passed, those young women who were very good looking, they were having bath. Okay? Nudity in Shastric age need not mean nudity as we see it in the present age. For us, nudity means being without clothes. Perhaps they had other standards in the Vedic age, where when they talk about nudity, they are not really talking about being completely free of clothes, but by their standards, it would be considered naked, right? So when we travel, for instance, from India to the West, and then we see that during summer specifically, because of the extraordinary weather, people wearing clothes which are inappropriate based on Vedic standards, then we make a statement saying that they're almost naked. In a similar vein, one has to understand that the women themselves were very qualified, but based on the Vedic understanding, they were considered naked. And they did not cover themselves when Sukadev Goswami walked by. They did not really feel motivated, saying that, oh, here's a male coming by, I should be covering myself because it's inappropriate for me to be in this state before a man. When Sukadev Goswami passed by, they didn't. And in fact, Sukadev Goswami himself was without clothes. And he was a young person. He was 16 or 17 at the time. He was 16 years old. So he was not a child, but the women were not motivated. So there was absolutely, in other words, there was absolutely no perception of lust. There was no perception of contamination in Sukadev Goswami. No perception. The women did not even feel threatened that they had to cover themselves. Okay? Women have an instinct. They have an instinct where they can perceive lust, and then they have a tendency to protect themselves from such lust. They had absolutely no fear, just as much as a mother would not be feeling inhibitive and ashamed to be feeding her child. You see, the mother doesn't feel that she is not completely covered and so on when she's in touch with her child, a very young child who is being fed. Why? Because the mother is able to perceive that there is no lust. There is no lust, there's love, there's affection, so the mother is feeding the child, and the mother doesn't feel motivated to engage in such. Right? So similarly, when these women saw Sukadev Goswami passing by, his purity was so profound that they were not motivated to cover themselves because they were able to perceive that purity. He had no interest whatsoever, even though by age he was qualified to be interested because of his age. But the moment Srila Vyasadeva passed by, they all covered themselves. The distinction given here is that Srila Vyasadeva, this is not to say that Vyasadeva was not pure. He was an incarnation of the Lord. The reason why they covered themselves was because Srila Vyasadeva was a grihastha. A grihastha is someone who knows the distinction between man and woman. Otherwise, he cannot be a grihastha. Right? So because Vyasadeva was a grihastha, they immediately covered themselves, understanding that he has to distinguish, being a grihastha, between man and woman. Otherwise, what is grihastha ashram? So because he has to distinguish, one should be covering themselves because that distinction itself means that there's recognition of the opposite gender. But Sukadeva Goswami, on the other hand, no distinction whatsoever. He was really perfectly, transcendently situated where there was no distinction. So that's the difference which is being explained here in terms of the receiver of knowledge. He was so qualified and he was such a pure vessel. Okay, so that's being spoken of here. Okay, there's another reason why this is coming up. There are very confidential aspects of family life. There are very confidential aspects of Lord's pastimes further down in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. How is it that someone who has no interest whatsoever is even engaging in such topics? Okay, this is the other beautiful definition that is coming out of this verse. Is Shaunak Rishi is curious. There are so many wonderful pastimes of the Lord, confidential pastimes of the Lord that are being discussed further out in the Srimad Bhagavatam. How did Sukadeva Goswami, speak that? So that qualification is also being brought forth, saying to discuss very confidential pastimes, to be able to even mention those pastimes in the 10th canto, one has to have the qualities of Sukadeva Goswami, and that particular quality is to be completely free of sex desire. Okay, so we'll stop here for today. Let me take the few questions and then we'll continue again in the 4th chapter further out. Let's see. Okay. What are the qualifications of a person with higher consciousness? Is it the love he has for Guru and Krishna? Also, how can we find out that this person has higher consciousness? Well, the first, you have asked several questions. The first is that what are the qualifications of a person with higher consciousness? See, the qualification of a person with higher consciousness is being given by Krishna. Higher consciousness is something that we perceive through actions. You see, we don't want to be mystics. We want to be seeing actions, external actions. So what we want to do is not so much try to perceive the consciousness of the person, but we want to understand whether the actions of a person are in line with scripture. Are these in line with scriptural standards of behavior? That is the most important aspect which one has to be able to judge. Because there really isn't a barometer for someone to judge higher consciousness unless they themselves have such higher consciousness. If someone has higher consciousness, then they can recognize the person who has higher consciousness because they can perceive the energy. They can perceive certain things. Okay? They can simply, by conversing with the person, they can find out where the desires lie. By simply conversing with the person, they can find out what the objectives are. Conversing with the person, they can find out whether they are agitated by, or rather, are they getting perturbed by material phenomena. So there are different ways for us to situate and determine if someone has a higher consciousness. And it has always got to have a Shastric basis. It has always got to have a Shastric basis. That is the reason why it is important that the external behavior of a person has to always be in line with Shastra. Otherwise, it can confuse those who ought to be following the other person in terms of establishing standards. So to answer your question, it is always the following of Shastra which is very important in being able to judge higher consciousness. And what exactly do we judge? We judge the external aspects of what should be done and what should not be done. So for example, following the regulative principles, chanting at a certain time. I remember my spiritual master, every time he used to go to any temple, immaterial of how fatigued and how tired he was and how disparate, the travel was to his body and so on. He always used to make it a point to sit before Srila Prabhupada during chanting time in every yatra so that devotees are able to get the right inspiration from the visiting preacher. Because if they don't get the right inspiration from the visiting preacher, then it becomes very difficult for them. So is the case with other aspects of life. Okay, they should be able to observe and learn, and what they observe and what they learn should be consistent with Shastric conclusions as well. Otherwise, there would be confusion. So that is how we determine if something is in line or not in line. If something is in line and we find that 9 out of 10 characteristics are in line, one characteristic of the person is standing out and we are confused, it is time to approach someone who is senior to understand. We shouldn't reach conclusions. If we find that many factors are in line and then there is something amiss, it's better to approach a senior and find out that, okay, this is what I observed. I don't want to commit an offense. I want to present this to you. I want to know if that Prabhu or that Mataji, this is what they did. Is it okay for them to do it? I'm confused. That might be a better way for us to perceive as well. So just to make sure we understand, that is how we understand higher consciousness as far as we are concerned, because we are sadhakas. But those who are really in higher consciousness, they know who is in what level, and they also know who is on their level. For us, we need to see it. We need to perceive things. Okay. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. So when we say Srila Sukadeva Goswami realized the Srimad Bhagavatam, did he experience? Okay, this is a different question. Okay, it's all mixed up. What is meant by pure in fearing with respect to the following from the purport of verse 44? What is meant by purity in fearing? Fearing and defending are all the same sides. They are the same. And what is fearing and what is defending? Fearing and defending is all about association. Prisoners in federal prisons or any prison here in America, wherever, they fear being put into solitary confinement because they don't like to be alone. The opposite is said of rishis who seek solitary places so that they can concentrate on the holy names. Okay? So the fear of the prisoners who are conditioned is the fear of not being able to socialize. The rishis, on the other hand, are avoiding social contact because they are fearless. They don't need social contact. They are wanting to find seclusion so that they can concentrate in the holy names. And then, when they are secluded, they seek association with other personalities who are similarly motivated, who are able to chant the holy names. So, purity in fearing is simply a matter of wanting to associate with the right people for social. That's what it means. Transcending such needs and being able to associate for the purpose of advancing one's culture, devotional culture. Okay. When we say Sukadeva Goswami realized the Srimad Bhagavatam, did he experience all the 4 primary rasas associated with Krishna? We will answer this question when the time comes, but the realization of Sukadeva Goswami is being given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and what is being given in itself has a lot of variety. In other words, one can go very, very deep even on every verse given in the different cantos. Okay, so depending on the level of granularity one can go into, one can go very deep into each of the rasas which is being given. Okay, so he has touched upon all the rasas. Has he realized and has he understood? The answer is yes. Just as much as someone in the Vatsalya rasa or someone in the Sakya rasa, for example, in Vraja, the Balaram is the servitor Godhead. Balaram is in Sakya rasa. Balaram is in also partially Vatsalya rasa. But he can understand that Krishna has to associate with those who are in Madhurya rasa. So he gives Krishna time and he secludes and then takes the cowherd boys away so that Krishna can go and meet the other devotees who are wanting to associate with him in other rasas. For this purpose, Balaram does have understanding of Madhurya rasa. So is the case with Sridham and others who may have an understanding of Madhurya rasa. So it doesn't mean that they have to experience it fully. So the verses in Srimad Bhagavatam which are being given touching upon, for example, the most confidential rasas themselves, can be understood and churned and spoken about by those who are in other rasas. So it is not so much that one has to experience all the rasas to write and speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. They can go very deep into one of those if they have, complete experience. Okay. Suppose we are just reading the translation and purport from Srimad Bhagavatam to others, like family, but not sharing our own realization. Is it also required the qualification that you mentioned? Will I be affecting the other person's consciousness as I am not qualified, or is it okay to just read out aloud to someone such as family? I would like to mention, I mentioned this even while speaking, that we are sincere with our purpose of wanting to come in touch with Bhagavad Dharma through Srimad Bhagavatam. So since we are sincerely wanting to elevate ourselves, we are sincerely wanting to move forward, we are already on the path of purification. This distinguishes one from someone who has absolutely no interest in Bhagavad Dharma, but who wants to engage in the act of speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam for the purpose of wanting to, make a few dollars. So that's the point which I was trying to make, which I also made clear. The effect that we will have on the consciousness of others by speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam is going to depend on our consciousness, of which there's no doubt. So does it mean that we don't speak the Srimad Bhagavatam if we contain and develop, desires which are mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam as not conducive? The answer is no, because we're sincerely proceeding forward. But the effect itself may not be very profound, or the effect itself will depend on the qualification of the speaker. Okay. Also, it's not an offense to make a distinction like the person has higher consciousness. Did I miss this, or was it a continuation? Also, is it not an offense to make such distinctions like this person has higher consciousness while the other is not? Or should one make such a distinction? Discrimination is required. You see, one has to have discrimination, because discrimination with the purpose of wanting to protect one's consciousness, not for the purpose of criticism, is required. One has to be able to distinguish that someone is superior. One has to be able to distinguish that someone is of the same level, or someone is new and someone requires help. This distinction has to be there. So there's nothing wrong in making a distinction. Okay? So nothing wrong at all. We should make a distinction, but with the purpose of wanting to qualify the person in terms of our behavior. What should we do? How should we react to that person? Okay? That is very important. Okay, I don't see any more questions, and it's pretty late as well. So if there aren't any more questions, I would just end here, and we'll continue on Monday with the 4th chapter, and perhaps on Thursday, which is the following Thursday, we would take up the further chapters. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.